to upcoming events. December is usually a slow month, but we have one coming in a couple of weeks. It's a developer testable web part for SharePoint. And we will have more events coming in next year in January and February. We are looking to finalize the times and dates and everything, so stay tuned. Check our website for updates. And if you're curious about all the different links, you can see them here. I guess with that, I see lots of questions coming here. Great. Well, I think it's time to start. Scott, are you ready?
Sure.
Okay, take it from here.
Great. Well, I want to thank everyone for coming this morning. I hope everyone can hear me fine. For people that this is their first time doing one of these Lidnug chats, I do them kind of about every 2 or 3 months. So keep an eye on my blog, and you can learn about the next one. Basically, the format is pretty much unplugged, so you can ask any questions you want. If you're unfamiliar with live meeting, you go to the Q&A tab at the top there, and you can basically submit your questions there. And what I generally try to do is basically go through the questions, try to find a couple that are kind of grouped together, so instead of just bouncing around from random topic to topic, I try to usually do 2 or 3 in a related topic at a time, so there's a little bit more consistency. So if you ask a question and I haven't got to it yet, there's a chance that it's just been on a different topic at the moment, and hopefully I'll be able to get to it. I think we have a whole hour, and so I'll try to answer as many questions as possible. And for those that need to leave early, there is a recording of the talk, and you can download it later and listen to it if you want. And I'll update my blog post to have a pointer to it as soon as it's available. It's usually a couple days after the talk. And so keep an eye out for there. So lots of questions starting to appear. So if you do have a question, definitely fire away and ask it here. And let's see. A couple questions coming out. There's a bunch of questions here. Good. So let's actually go ahead and let me kick it off with the topic that I'm surprised I have more questions about, but some of the blogosphere noise on Silverlight the last 2 weeks. So I've actually been out on parental leave, and I just came back this week. But we had a kind of a blow-up, I'd say, about 2.5 weeks ago, where a lot of people got all concerned that Silverlight was dead or something like that. I did want to kick things off by making it very clear Silverlight's not dead, and rumors of its demise are greatly exaggerated. Basically what happened was that PDC this year, we typically focus on a few new things that we focus on as opposed to talk about everything. And in the keynote, we basically focused on kind of 3 main topics. Big one being Azure and some of the cloud announcements that we made, which has lots of good stuff for ASP.NET and iOS on the back end. We spent a lot of time talking about Windows Phone 7. Which we just released in the U.S. this past week. And in Steve Ballmer's keynote, I did about a 15-minute demo building a Silverlight app for Windows Phone and showed off some of the great tooling there. And the third thing we focused on the keynote was IE9, and including some of the great work we're doing around HTML5 support there. So unfortunately, a lot of people interpreted that, plus an interview comment that Bob Muglia made a little bit later in the day as meaning we're pulling back on Silverlight. No, we're not. It just meant that we weren't planning on talking about the next major release of the desktop version of Silverlight at the event. It did not mean that when Silverlight is only for Windows Phone or only for certain devices. It just meant that we weren't talking about it at that particular event. And unfortunately, it kind of spiraled out into a lot of Twitter and blogosphere noise and speculation there. I kind of did a blog post on it a little bit, so if you haven't read my blog post from about 2 weeks ago, I recommend going and checking that out. We have what's called a Firestarter event, Silverlight Firestarter event, which has actually always been scheduled, but it's coming up on December 2nd, which is about 2 weeks from today, or 2 weeks from yesterday. And in that, we'll talk a lot about the next release of Silverlight. So we are actually going to do a pretty big disclosure of the next major release of Silverlight, show off a bunch of great features and I think hopefully people will be pretty happy in terms of the feature set that's coming. It's a pretty significant set of features, and hopefully talks well to the investment we're making there. We obviously are also investing heavily in HTML and HTML5, so it's, we don't think of one or the other being a zero-sum game, and so you are also going to see us over the next couple of months talk about the great work we're doing with ID9, but that doesn't mean that we're not investing heavily in Silverlight, and our focus with Silverlight is really on how do you deliver the richest possible, focusing both on premium media and on application. And again, the Firestarter event in about 2 weeks, you'll see a lot more about not only the wins we've had, but more importantly about what the future entails for the desktop version of Silverlight over the next year. So if you're interested in Silverlight, definitely come and watch that event. It'll be available online live. It's also available in person, and if you go to my blog, you can sign up to register for it, and it should be really good. So, a couple of other questions people asked. Matthew asked, why doesn't Office Live Meeting have a Silverlight client? Which is somewhat apropos given that we're in live meeting right now. For people that don't know, there's actually a new product that we've come out with called Lync, not L-I-N-Q, but I think it's L-Y-N-C, which is a new Office product that is the kind of latest version of our Communicator product, and I think also is the intersection of live meeting going forward as well. And the web-based version of that is actually built entirely in Silverlight. And so it's a good suggestion, and in fact, we've done it. And so I think it just shipped. We just launched it. So at some point soon, if you are using Communicator, Office Communicator, and Live Meeting, I think you will, with the next release, whenever you update to it, or next time you come to one of these chats, you'll see it actually be a Silverlight-based app. Okay. Let's see if there's any other around that, and then skip here. Around. Well, someone asked another question, which is, with all the talk around Silverlight, Windows Phone 7, HTML5, what is the marketing strategy for WPF so it's not lost in chatter? I want to make sure people know also Silverlight does, or WPF has a good feature as well. There's actually a good blog post that Pete Brown put out around the PDC timeframe called WPF Present and Future. I definitely recommend checking out. We're definitely behind WPF. WPF is kind of focused primarily on desktop apps, and so that's kind of the big investment point we're making there. And obviously, with things like Visual Studio, the latest release, we built it on WPF, and so you will see some nice improvements to WPF coming up in the next release. So definitely check out Pete Brown's paper on that, and we'll continue to make sure that WPF is part of our story and message, and it's a super important part of that message. So definitely, hopefully some good work happening there. Here, I just managed to exit out of my Q&A manager. There we go. So let me go and more diversity questions here today. So I'm trying to find a couple of them here. Roy asked, is there a live meeting version of the Windows Phone 7 app? You might want to do this talk at the beach sometime. I'd like to do this talk at the beach sometime too. Unfortunately, I don't know if there's a Windows Phone 7 version of this app available yet. If you haven't checked out Windows Phone 7, definitely do recommend doing it. There are some really cool apps that are already out there, and a couple that are communication-based that are appearing shortly. There is what do you call it? If you ever use a Slingbox, so that you can actually watch TV remotely, there's a Slingbox Windows Phone 7 app that I saw a demo of a little while ago. That's pretty cool. Don't know yet about live meeting when that's coming out. Let's see. So let me go and do a couple of server ones, and then we'll come back and we'll do some more client ones. So in terms of server ones, Raj asked the question, is there any easy way for creating portable views, master pages that can be reused across multiple applications in ASP.NET MVC? There is actually a pretty cool project that David Ebo, so if you search David, E-B-B-O, on the web, has put out recently, which is a class library project that contains what's called a single file generator that allows you to take Razor-based views and compile them into DLL assemblies. And so, helpers, and let you compile them into DLL assemblies. And so one nice thing about that is it makes it really easy to encapsulate functionality, and then you can just reference it as a assembly reference from within any ABC application you're working on. And so definitely check that out. You're going to see us do more on that. It's kind of a, I'd say, early start right now, but you'll see us invest a lot more on that in the near future. A couple other server ones here. Bill asked the question, is the TFS and Azure that was shown in the PDC keynote intended to be a low-cost TFS solution for small development shops, or is it targeted at massive development organizations? It's a good question. I'd say right now the TFS that we demoed, it's still early, is kind of designed for a couple things. I think I believe what we showed is actually TFS, both for source control, bug tracking, and I believe some automated builds. And the goal is, for most shops, especially for small shops and probably medium shops, that provides a great solution that you can just use. At the same time, we also think there's going to be people that are going to want really advanced configurations, and so we're also working closely with hosting partners to basically provide kind of hosted TFS solutions that you can take advantage of as well. And the great thing is, it is just TFS. So whether it's on-premise, on your own servers, whether it's hosted through a partner, whether it's running inside Azure, you can migrate from place to place, and it's the same feature set and kind of the same capabilities, and it's really just sort of slightly different service. So people that missed it, you can watch Bob Muglia's keynote, and Brian Harry did a great demo of kind of the first look at TFS running as a service inside Azure. Other things in terms of server stuff. Couple of EF questions. So Mike, Tim's asked, we've been working with EF code first since equals to E4 since your first July post. And was asking about when are we going to be able to ship kind of the entity framework for code first, the final release of it. And I know the EF team's working pretty hard on that. I don't actually manage the data team, but I believe the plan is first quarter of next year, so it's almost December now, so it should only be hopefully the next 90 days or so before I think the final release of that will be available. I don't know the status of the Go Live license on the next CTP. I'll follow up on that and see whether there's any way we can do a Go Live license for that. But yeah, I think it's a pretty sweet new technology for people that haven't checked it out. And one of the things you're going to see shortly as we release MVC3 and kind of our web stack, which includes SQL CE, IIS Express, and Web Matrix on kind of the beginning side, and then obviously MVC3 and Razor and all those things, and NuGet is kind of just a pretty comprehensive stack. I do think EF code first is an important missing piece that'll come out not with the initial MVC3 release, but hopefully only a few weeks later. And basically provide a really kind of elegant way to do data access in a super clean, agile-friendly approach. And so if you haven't checked it out, definitely check it out, and you're going to see us kind of push that out, I'd say, at a pretty big level in sort of things like samples and tutorials, because we do think it just works really well with it. Let me see if I get a couple of more async questions, and I'll go back to the client. See. Ryan asked a question by Twitter, what's the release track for MVC3, and do we have any sniffers of awesome new stuff? Basically, the MVC3 release is literally winding down very shortly. I'm tormenting the team right now with last-minute DCR, what we call change requests and feature suggestions. So I had them in my office yesterday saying, oh, you guys are wonderful, and there's just two little things more I'd like you to do, one more wafer. But they're doing their best to push back and shut it down. But they're taking the one I did yesterday, checking it in today, though. Basically, we're in the final stages of release for MVC3. Our plan is to try to finish it before Christmas, to actually have the bits done. And that way the team can actually have a holiday. And then we'll probably release it early next year, probably in January. So so typically what we do is we try to finish the release, put it in what we call escrow. It basically means we sit on the bits for a short while just to make sure there isn't any last-minute showstopper issues that we've missed, and then kind of expect to see that release probably happening in January. And that also gives the time to update all the tutorials and websites and things like that to make sure that people can hit the ground running. So it's very soon coming out. There are a couple of last-minute changes and additions we are making with MVC3 since the release candidate that we shipped, I think, last week or the week before. Most of them are kind of, I'd say, in the small fit and finish style things. We had some good naming suggestions on a few things that people post on my blog posts in terms of comments, in terms of, hey, it'd be great to add an overloaded method that did this, or it'd be great to rename this to be clear. So you'll see a number of things along those lines, and I think there are one or two additional features that we're squeezing in as well. So final release of that's coming out pretty soon, and I'm really excited by it. I think it's going to be a great release. Alexander asked a question. I was wondering if there's any planned release date for MVC3 stable and WebMatrix stable. So I just talked about the MVC3 release. You'll also see kind of we're trying to do it rather than just sort of drop different releases on people on different days. We are trying to coordinate multiple things. And so you will see MVC3, Razor, SQL CE4, NuGet, WebMatrix, and our Orchard projects all kind of release literally on the same day so that all the bits are consistent, they all work well together, and it make it easier for people to find stuff and install stuff. So again, you will see that happen very beginning of next year. So let's see. Let me see if I can get more ASP.NET ones, and we'll talk about more. John Tyndall asked a question, when is IS Express going to be integrated into VS 2010? And Eli also asked the question, any updates on SQL CE4? So I'll answer those together because they're sort of related. Basically, as part of that kind of web stack I mentioned that's going to sort of ship in early next year, the very beginning of next year, it includes MVC3, it includes WebMatrix, it includes Razor, it includes SQL CE4, it includes IS Express, Orchard, and a few other things. And so the final release of IS Express and SQL CE4 will ship as part of that. In parallel, we are then updating, we're using those two products both within WebMatrix as well as within Visual Studio. The Visual Studio tooling support for both IS Express and SQL CE will show up as part of VS SD1, which we haven't announced the final dates for, but it's not too far off. The point we'll start a public beta and then the final release. And so that'll just be integrated as part of that. So you'll be able to take advantage of that shortly. The reason that we have to include it as part of that is it does actually change some of the Visual Studio binaries. Things like the launch dialog and debugging and data explorer. And so we need to do a patch of VS in order to get the tooling support for SQL CE and IS Express. But the final tooling support would be pretty nice. Basically, you can take any ASP.NET project where you're using the built-in Cassini web server today, right-click, and you can say convert it to use IS Express, or you can pull up the properties page and set it in one of the property panes. And then from that point on, anytime you do F5 to get IS Express, you can now do SSL with that. You can do, rewrite rules. You can do basically advantage of the full IS feature set. And if you want to always use IS Express by default for new projects, you'll be able to go into Tools Options and just say use IS Express by default. And then from that point on, any new projects you create will actually use IS Express. And likewise for SQL CE, you can basically drop a SDF file into your app data directory, double-click it. It'll take you to Server Explorer, and all of the tools that you're used to in terms of laying out tables, editing data, using things like Entity Framework, and drag and dropping tables onto the data designer. All that will basically work with SQL CE. So it's a pretty sweet workflow. If you haven't checked out Scott Hanselman's talk, I linked to it in a blog post where I was talking about ASP.NET MVC3RC. He basically did a really cool blog post, or a really cool talk at PDC, where he basically built an app from scratch, and he uses actually IS Express and SQL CE in the context of Visual Studio. that gives you a sense of the type of tooling support you'll get, and that'll be available very shortly. Keep an eye out for that. We have to answer a few more MVC questions, and we'll go back to the client and answer some more clients there. So we will ask, any ideas for MVC4? Yeah, we actually do have a lot of ideas and features that we'll be adding to MVC4, which will be the next release of MVC after 3. At this point, kind of what we typically do with the release is, we come up with a couple big themes for what we want to try to do, figure out all the features that kind of fall into that theme, and then add a whole bunch of kind of polish towards the end of that. And then, for the next release, we come up with a new set of themes. So, some of the themes that we came up with for MVC3 were things like the new kind of Razor view engine, things like unobtrusive JavaScript, and some early HTML5 integration with things like validation, things like dependency injection and better testing support, things like caching and improved output caching support, and so on. So there's a couple pretty big buckets and themes, NuGet being another big one for package management. We'll do a similar thing for MVC4. We've got a couple of themes on the back burner that we're kind of thinking about and working on, and I think it's going to be a good release. But we haven't got to the point where, we can say for sure exactly what will be in the next major release. One thing you will see is us use the NuGet project that we are shipping and bundling with MVC3, but also it's available for other projects as well, to deploy and release features at a more agile pace. And so there'll be some big features, obviously, in MVC4 that require core changes, but I think you're also going to see us use NuGet as a way to ship new helpers, ship new libraries, ship new functionality out of band a lot faster. And the beauty with NuGet is basically, we can ship a library. So, for example, I think we'll probably have a pretty rich migrations library. Not migrations, scaffolding library in January. We're working on migrations too. But for scaffolding in January that we can have, hopefully, around the time that MVC3 ships. It won't be in the core setup, but the nice thing is you say file new project on an MVC app, and you can basically just say install package MVC scaffold. And then from that point on, you can take advantage of rich scaffolding. And we can update that, week to week or month to month as we add new scaffolding features. And we don't have to wait till the next major release to do it. So you'll see a bunch of features kind of ship and come out sooner there. So now let's talk a little bit about ASP.NET. I'll come back to ASP.NET, but I'm going to switch back to the client there for a little bit, and then just to answer a few more there, and we'll come back to the server. Let's see. Client. Talk a little bit about some Windows Phone ones, maybe. Andrew Long asked the question, when will developers have access to Compass functionality in the Windows Phone 7 API? I think if there's Compass support today. I know there's GPS location. I'm not sure if the sensor for Compass is exposed. If it's not exposed today, you'll see it show up very short, certainly with the next update we do. You're basically going to see kind of a lot of much richer support coming. Yes, you'll see that show up probably in the next release if it's not available today. Let's see, other questions here. Jonathan asked this question, what's the strategy for Silverlake for Windows Phone 7, Silverlake 4, link OData support, etc.? Basically, you're going to see, with Windows Phone 7, we obviously, used Silverlight as kind of the core application programming model for the release. The version of Silverlight that we shipped in Windows Phone 7 is basically kind of a Silverlight 3 Plus would probably be the best way to describe it. It has all the functionality that Silverlight 3 has, plus it has a bunch of additional functionality and performance optimizations specific to kind of small hardware. So, for example, things like the animation thread actually runs off of the UI thread in the background, so we can take advantage of kind of and run better and smoother on kind of low-powered ARM chips that are multi-core. Basically our plan is with each major release of a Windows Phone to basically bring in the latest Silverlight functionality. And so, the next release of Windows Phone, you'll see us add even more Silverlight functionality in that, as well as provide kind of richer access to the device and additional device-specific capabilities. So you'll see that come more and more. The other question you asked was, what about OData support? There is actually an OData library that we released at the PDC 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago now, that you can use with Windows Phone 7 and Silverlight today. And so if you search on OData Windows Phone 7, you should find a reference to that, and you can download and use that starting now and take advantage of it within your Windows Phone 7 applications. Rajat asked a question, we are facing challenges in using Silverlight as it doesn't receive SOAP faults. Is there any way to do that and integrate it within unit test with TFS? Send me email, scott@microsoft.com. I can follow up with someone and try to, I'm not entirely sure the SOAP fault issue, but if you send me email on that, we can certainly, follow up. Let's see. Ian Walker asked a question for Windows Phone 7. When will devs start getting feedback on sales? Can we expect to see any new devices next year? The store, just kind of the app marketplace, just kind of opened up broadly about 2 weeks ago. And one of the things that's still coming online is full analytics, so that you get sales data and more importantly, you actually get the money that you make. I believe that what the Windows Phone team has announced is that starting in January is when that data and the checks start getting cut. So if you go to their website, they have a blog post with a little bit more details on that. And so that is coming, but probably it's still a few more weeks away. Other client questions here, or say phone questions. Yes, question. Do you have a date for CDMA phone support within Windows Phone 7? I don't have anything I can talk to specifically on that. I believe there is some communications the Windows Phone team's done where they've talked about the roadmap. And so I recommend looking at the developer blog or the Windows Phone 7 team's blog post, just because they've got the most up-to-date details on things like that. John Tyndall asked, is there an ability to set up a private app store for Windows Phone 7 for use in corporate environments? Unfortunately, that's not supported today. So I think the feature that John's asking for is kind of an enterprise marketplace or app store. That is something that we're looking at for the future, but that isn't available this month right now for Windows Phone 7. I asked a question, by release of Windows Phone 7, do you mean a hardware refresh or an OS refresh that works on current hardware? We haven't kind of announced any details on kind of next things, but you will see, I mean, one of the nice things about Windows Phone 7 is we do support updates on it, and so we can do updates that are streamed down the wire as well as updates that you do when you plug in your phone into your PC or Mac. And so you will see software updates, sometimes with patches, sometimes with new features that will show up for existing hardware over the next couple of months. Let's see. Jeff asked, will existing phones be able to upgrade to later Silverlight releases? Yeah, as I mentioned in that last one there, we will be releasing software updates for existing devices. And so, I think you will see new functionality and features show up. We've already talked about, for example, copy and paste will show up, I think, early next year, which is kind of an unfortunate feature you can get into the first initial release, but that'll just be kind of a servicing update that'll happen early next year. So, yeah, you will see us continue to kind of add and extend features there. Let's see. See some more client ones. Let me go back to the server. Aditya asked, if you're asked why we should develop in Windows Phone 7 over Android and iPhone, what would you say? Well, that's a good question. I'd say basically, the biggest thing I think probably for development for Windows Phone 7 is that I think is compelling about it. One is it is a pretty nice device that has kind of a very differentiated user experience that's getting really good reviews and some good buzz from early users. And so, if there's a market opportunity to build an app for the device, that's a good reason. You can get paid or you can get people using your stuff to build an app for it. I think then also the developer productivity and the tooling support that we've done for Windows Phone 7 is pretty darn good. And so being able to use ES 2010 for Phone Express, as well as Expression Blend for Phone, both of which are free, and being able to use .NET to program both of those ends up being kind of, in Silverlight obviously, in XNA for games, provides a pretty compelling development platform that's pretty fun. And so a lot of the feedback we've gotten from people that are developing today for iPhone or Android are, wow, the productivity that I get as a developer, really blows me away. And so, hopefully there's the unit share that makes it compelling, regardless of how compelling the developer platform is. But I think the developer platform being kind of as solid and as kind of fun as it is, hopefully also makes Windows Phone 7 in general a compelling platform to target. So, trying to think. How many people have asked other plans to support Silverlight for iPhone and Android? We don't have any plans right now that we've talked about to support those two platforms. In general, one of the things we're trying to do is partly it's because, unfortunately, some of those platforms are pretty hard to target, either for policy reasons from the manufacturer, or because, in the case of Android, there's an awful lot of different variations of Android devices out there, and I think as developers that are building apps for Android discovered, there's a lot of differences in terms of the capabilities of the phone. So getting a really great experience is hard. In general, the strategy that we're focusing on with Silverlight is, we are trying to get as many broad sockets as possible. And that's one of the reasons why we support both Windows and Mac on the desktop. And I think that we're trying to, though, how do we provide kind of the richest possible experience? And so, when we originally started Silverlight, at one point we wanted to run it on everything, every internet-connected TV. And, we have found over the last really 2 or 3 years, in particular the last 2 years, just sort of this explosion of different types of devices and form factors. And, we don't think it's going to be possible for anyone to have a single implementation of a runtime that works everywhere. And that's true not only for Silverlight and Flash and Java, that's also true for things like Cocoa, obviously, the native Android APIs, and, frankly also for HTML5. There will be different implementations of HTML5 across all these different types of devices. And so rather than us try to port and kind of deliver kind of a mixed quality experience across lots of devices, our goal with Silverlight is how do we target the devices that have enough reach that there's a lot of sockets of them, but how do we also target them in such a way that we can provide the richest possible experience, meaning a native style experience on those types of devices. And that means great perf, that means great feature set, it means great capability, and an experience that really makes people go, wow. And so that's why, with Windows Phone 7, for example, with Silverlight, we spent a lot of time not only bringing Silverlight to that device, but really optimizing the performance, providing kind of pivot and panorama style controls that you can take advantage of to kind of seamlessly integrate, and integrating as part of the App Store. And you're going to see us do that with Silverlight with more devices in the future. And so that's kind of the strategy that we're on there. So how does Silverlight relate to HTML5? Well, HTML5, or HTML in general, and JavaScript in general, if you want to target every possible device, is like HTML4 does today, is going to provide a way to do that. And, if you want the maximum reach, HTML today with HTML4 and eventually with HTML5 and presumably in the future with HTML6, is going to give you that. You will have different implementations of HTML5 across devices, but, there will probably be HTML HTML4 and certainly HTML4 and eventually HTML5 implementations across probably all devices. Again, with Silverlight, our goal is, though, we do think reach is important, but also rich and kind of native amazing experiences are also important. And so, we don't think that's a zero-sum game. You do one or the other. I think people are going to want to have reach for a lot of scenarios, and then also have rich on a bunch of scenarios and a bunch of device form factors as well. And kind of our goal with Silverlight is to be that rich story and let you build kind of the richest possible experience on a wide enough range of devices and form factors that make compelling sense to do so. So, other questions. Ian Walker asked a question, which Windows Phone, I was going to do a couple more Windows Phone and then we'll jump to another topic. Which Windows Phone 7 device do you use and why? Will there be another Silverlight release for Symbian? I've used a couple of Windows Phone 7 devices. Most of them that I've been using have been early dev kit devices that were never intended to be actually on the market. They're simply early hardware. And so I would not recommend some of the 6-month-old devices that I had. There's a bunch of really good devices out there in the market right now. I think the one that and because there's a shortage of devices, I'm still using a dev device. I think my plan is actually to buy a Samsung Focus, which everyone that I've seen that has one just raves about. And so that's going to be the device I'm going to get. I'm hoping to go to the store this weekend, and they'll still be in stock. I know they've been selling out left, right, and center, but I'm hoping I have a store where I think I'm going to be able to find one. But yeah, that's kind of the device that I am lusting after at the moment. Other Windows Phone ones, and then we'll move on. People ask, when we'll see Windows Phone 7 on other devices, like inventory scanners, things like Target, grocery stores, etc. You will see us take Silverlight and run it not just on a Windows Phone, but also things like Windows Embedded. And so you will start to see, specifically for the your scenario there of grocery stores, there will be some people that will use a Windows Phone 7 device, like say an extender, to do things like barcode scanning and things like that. I think a lot of embedded scenarios, like grocery stores, will probably also use Windows Embedded, which is an operating system specifically designed for kind of embedded use case scenarios. And we are porting Silverlight to that platform, and so expect to see people be able to really easily use that for embedded scenarios as well. Many people have asked about Connect and things like that, and kind of what is our plan there. Basically, we don't have anything to announce officially right now, but that is certainly something that would be interesting to support, and hopefully we can talk a little bit more about that in the future. Let's see. Other questions. Alexander asked the question, just out of curiosity, VS 2008 is 2 years older than VS 2010, and VS 2010 is a year old. Any plans for the next release? Good news is we definitely are planning a next release of Visual Studio. That was a joke. We have many more releases coming in Visual Studio. Yeah, we're kind of working pretty hard right now on the next release. Generally we're going to wait a little bit until we get it a little bit further along before we disclose all the features of it. But hopefully some pretty exciting stuff coming as part of the next release. Anders Heilsberg did a great talk at PDC, if you haven't seen already, where he talked about some of the new async capabilities that we're adding to both VB and C#. And I'm pretty bullish on that. I think that's going to be pretty cool. And basically, for people that haven't seen it, it's a great talk. Anders is a great speaker. And he showed it both in context of WPF as well as ASP.NET on the server. But one of the kind of the trends that we see is pretty interesting is kind of this move towards async programming, which is really compelling for two reasons. One is for client apps, increasingly apps are connected to services. Many of those services either hosted in the cloud or remotely across the internet. And, there's wait times involved when you retrieve data. And, typically today we recommend people write async code when they're requesting that type of data so that their UI doesn't freeze and block. Writing async code today is hard because you basically have to kind of separate out your algorithms into multiple methods and do callbacks, and there's some grungy code you sometimes need to write. And, it's A, not fun, and B, sometimes error-prone to do so. What Andrews has done and the languages team have done in Visual Studio with VB and C# for the next release is really provided a nice, elegant way to integrate async into the language. So there's new keywords like async and wait that you can actually use just like you do, think of it like LINQ. It's just sort of integrated into the language, and it makes it a really elegant way that basically we can unwind the UI, unwind the thread and still be processing the UI, but you can kind of write it in almost a synchronous way. Or it looks like a synchronous way, but it's actually an async way within VB or C#. And again, that's great for client apps like Silverlight or WPF or WinForms. And on the server side, it's also really good because it means that your web server doesn't actually have to block as it's doing data operations or calling web services. And basically, it means that we can reuse worker threads inside ASP.NET much more efficiently. And ASP.NET today, we think, has the best perf of any web framework out there. I think with the async stuff that we're going to introduce with the next major release of .NET and NBS, we really have the potential to kind of have the best async web framework out there and really drive perf and scale to the next level. So that's one thing in the next release we have disclosed. Many more features coming as well, but that was kind of a teaser that we talked about at PDC that we're pretty excited about. Brian asked, is there any way to get Anders to come to Lidnug to present? Send me an email and we can try. I've been planning to do lunch sometime in the next little while, so I can offer to pay for lunch if he comes and does a talk here.
That's great. Thanks so much.
we don't really go out to super expensive lunches, so it's probably about $12 worth of lunch, but I'll see whether that makes a difference. Let me go back to the server since I did a bunch of client questions, and then we'll come back here. Couple entity framework questions. So what are the advantages of entity framework above and beyond in Hibernate? Is this a better technology to use over AO.NET? What about performance and scalability? Well, one thing I'd mention is so both in Hibernate and entity framework are actually built on top of ADO.NET. So a lot of the core things like database connection pooling and things like that are provided by ADO.NET in both entity framework and in Hibernate pick up and use. In Hibernate, it's a great object relational mapper system, and especially for people doing domain-driven design, it has a bunch of great features, and so it's a great framework. Entity framework is kind of an ORM that we build and support as well for .NET. And, I think in particular with Entity Framework 4 that just shipped as part of .NET 4, and then in particular with the Code First extensions that we're shipping shortly on top of that, it also provides a very clean way that you can do POCO-based modeling of classes. You can use things like repository patterns really cleanly, and I think it provides a pretty nice workflow there. And so I think they're both great choices. I'm not going to claim to be an ORM expert. I know enough to use them well, but I think there's some good there's good opinions as to which one is better than the other. But at least now I think they're both in a similar equivalence class in terms of capability. I think Hibernate has probably in some ways a richer set of extensions built up around it. And I know people really love it a lot, but I think EF also is growing in popularity, especially with the version 4 that addressed a lot of the feedback for the first release. And so, hopefully they're both good choices that you can use. Alashi asked, are there any new ORM in plan or discussed? I hope we don't introduce a new ORM anytime soon. We seem to have introduced several already. There is, though, not a new ORM, but a new update, which is the EF Code First technology that's coming out. That builds on top of EF, so it's not a new object relational mapper, but I do think it provides a really elegant way to do data access and leverages the strengths of EF, but it also provides some pretty nice capabilities for doing kind of POCO and cleaner domain-driven design approaches. Let's see, a couple other server ones. We'll come back into the client. Gregor asked, does Entity Framework 4 handle GUIDs as primary keys? Send me mail. I think it. I'm not sure. Send me mail. I can find out for sure. I know I've answered that question for someone else, where I looped them in with the EF team. I don't 100% remember the answer. Part of me says yes, and part of me says no. So send me mail. I can find out for sure. Rich asked the question, the Razor View engine is great so far, very intuitive. Trying to sell it internally to use on our next project. Hard to since we have such a large investment in ASP.NET. Any suggestions? Well, one of the things that you can do with Razor, so I'm a big fan of Razor, which is our kind of new view engine. It doesn't replace, we're still improving the existing ASPX-based view engine, obviously, as well. And all of the features, all of the runtime features in MVC 3 work equally well in both Razor and in the ASPX view engine. So you don't need to use Razor to take advantage of any new ASP.NET MVC specific runtime features. It's just sort of a different syntax that is pretty concise and I think pretty clean. One thing that is nice is that you can use Razor views with ASPX views in the same app. So it's not an all or nothing style of conversion. You can use one or the other. You can also actually, if you're using helper methods like the HTML action helper method to render an action, or HTML.partial to render a partial, you can actually have a Razor view call an ASPX partial, or an ASPX view call a Razor partial. The only thing you can't do is you can't inherit a master page or layout page between ASPX views and Razor views, but yeah, you can, if you want to, just sort of keep that duplicated, that one file, and then you can have half the site be written in one view engine, the other in another half. I think you will also see a few people, I've talked to a few people that are already thinking about, because it's pretty easy to convert ASPX views to Razor views, because it's still VB or C# in the code. A few people I know that have been talking about actually building kind of an automated script that will actually just go through your views and allow you to convert if you want to. So yeah, I think hopefully a couple options there that you can take advantage of. A few other things in the web space. What's my take on jQuery templates? I'm pretty bullish on jQuery templates. My team actually built them. So for people that don't know, I just watched, I think in October, we've been working on my team on a couple of jQuery extensions that we've contributed to the jQuery community. So jQuery templates is one of them. jQuery kind of what's called data linking, which is kind of like data binding, and jQuery globalization are kind of the three jQuery plugins that my team's built. We've contributed them into the community. They're now official jQuery plugins, blessed by the jQuery project. And jQuery templates is actually going to be added directly into jQuery 1.5. So if you download jQuery Core 1.5, jQuery templates will be just built in. So I expect you'll see a lot of people start using jQuery templates pretty heavily because it is now the default templating mechanism for jQuery. So we're kind of excited that we were able to contribute that and give back to the community. I think it's great for ASP.NET developers, but hopefully it'll be great for other frameworks as well. You will see us then within ASP.NET start to take advantage of some of the jQuery more and our controls and helpers in the future as well. So you will see things like a jQuery data grid show up in the near future, and that'll work technically with any framework. But we're going to make sure that on the server side with ASP.NET we have a bunch of great support so that ASP.NET works wonderfully well with it, and it'll build on top of those extensions we've contributed, like templating, globalization, and data binding. And our goal is, how do we just sort of provide a really seamless developer workflow end to end? Someone asked, okay, so what's, sounds like you're all excited about jQuery. What's the roadmap for the AJAX control toolkit and ASP.NET AJAX? Are we abandoning it? No, we're definitely not abandoning it. We continue to support it and continue to enhance it. In general, I think what you're going to see us do with ASP.NET AJAX is we're focusing a lot on, I'll call server-side scenarios. So in other words, where you want to use controls, whether it's the update panel, update progress that are built into ASP.NET itself, or controls like the AJAX control toolkit, and you want to add some dynamic client-side functionality, but in a server-controlled kind of way. And the benefit there is I don't have to write lots of JavaScript. I can actually take advantage of kind of server-controlled functionality. And that's where we think the sweet spot is for a lot of the ASP.NET AJAX capabilities. And that's typically where we see most people using them. Part of the reason we were investing in jQuery is we also see a lot of people that want to use and write a lot of client-side JavaScript because they want more power, they want more control, they want to write JavaScript. And that's great too. Originally we were going to add those types of jQuery functionality into the ASP.NET AJAX framework. And, one of the things I kind of asked the team, I don't know, 9 months ago or 12 months ago was, let's not duplicate all the great work that's in jQuery. If there's already a great community out there, a lot of great books and a lot of great tutorials, it feels weird to duplicate that. Why don't we just sort of embrace that and add to it? And so that's part of the reason why you're also seeing us invest heavily in jQuery, is we think of jQuery as a great way to do that type of client-side functionality. It's very complementary to both ASP.NET as well as, frankly, the ASP.NET AJAX work. You can use jQuery and ASP.NET AJAX and the AJAX control toolkit together. And so, rather than write things like, selectors and things like that, jQuery already has that. Let's just leverage that, and let's add new functionality like the templating, data binding, and globalization stuff that jQuery didn't have already. And so we're kind of making the final result better for everyone. And so, we're definitely not backing away from ASP.NET AJAX, but you will see ASP.NET AJAX be a little bit more kind of server control-based scenarios, and more of our client-side investments are going to happen through jQuery. Let's see. Lots of good questions. Drowning in questions here. If there's any more server ones, then we can go back to the client. Let's see. John R. asked the question, the support for building ASP.NET apps directly from VS 2010 is great, but the support from Teambuild is really poor. Why is that? We expect to get kind of looking more samples, tutorials, and a better workflow there. That is definitely one of the things that you're going to see us invest pretty heavily on next year. There's actually, the Teambuild support for ASP.NET is actually pretty good. It's just a little unclear exactly how to enable it. So I say we have a bunch of blog posts and tutorials all around the web that don't really tell a cohesive story, and you kind of have to figure out a lot of things by yourself. And so one of the things you'll see us do first half of next year is get much better guidance around automated build scenarios and kind of how do you enable what I'll call kind of continuous deployment style capability, so that basically every time you do a check-in, you can do a build and a deployment kind of as part of an integrated workflow. And so a lot of that will come in the form of guidance. And you'll also see us update things like web deploy and our other infrastructure to make that work even better as well. So anyway, you can do it today, so I wouldn't necessarily say it's really bad. It's just not easily documented, and which is bad, and we're working hard on fixing that. We go back now and do a few more client questions. Let's see. Let's do a couple of WPF and serverless questions here. Actually, one last server one, then we'll do some client ones. Is there a tool for converting MVC2 apps to MVC3 apps? Gregor asked that question. There will be an automated tool that will ship once MVC3 is released. The best thing to do is check out the release notes, though, of MVC3. It's like a Word doc, and it's a little bit of manual process, but it's only about 3 or 4 minutes of manual process. You just go and change the references in your project file, and then close and reopen the project, and at that point it's updated. So check out the release notes today, and we will have an automated tool around the time that MVP3 ships that allows you to automatically update it as well. In terms of some client questions here, let's see. So BBZ asks, any plans to update some of the older existing framework classes and functions, i.e. polishing the base? Definitely yes. Typically for each kind of major release of .NET, we do that. So with .NET 4, we did that. With the next release of .NET, we'll also obviously continue to do that. So, I'd say, especially the next couple of years, one of the things we are trying to do is let's not create new surface area per se. Let's make sure that we're going back and investing heavily in polishing the existing surface area and making that richer. One simple example, I talked about some of the async work that Anders is doing with the languages around VB and C#. We're also doing a bunch of polishing around async with the framework libraries so that, all of the frameworks, WPF, Silverlight, ASP.NET, Entity Framework, networking, File.io, etc., work very cleanly with that model when it comes out with the next release. And you'll also see us go back and add helper methods and functions and new helper classes that kind of polish and round out the feature set in the framework as well. Let's see. So speaking of that, BBB asked, hey, I heard the WCF team will be implementing async wait. Any ideas when that'll be out? The async wait language support will show up with the next release of .NET when the async stuff is actually part of the languages officially, not just in CTP form. You can actually do async with WCF today. You have to sort of use our existing async pattern, but you can actually use that today. But the language integration with async and wait will show up with the release of .NET that comes out with the new language support. June asked the question, what other programs are being migrated to Silverlight or WPF at Microsoft? I mentioned the Office Link Communicator product is built now in Silverlight, the web edition. The Azure Control Panel is now built in Silverlight. Bits of SQL Server are built in WPF now. Obviously, Visual Studio and Expression are built in WPF. Crescent, which is our new reporting services product that we've talked about briefly, and we'll probably see some more demos of that soon, is built in Silverlight. So you are seeing a number of products, and obviously Windows Phone 7 is built using Silverlight as well. So lots of projects out there, and from Microsoft itself, and then obviously lots of around there as well. Dan asked the question, hey, what's the deal with WPF going away? Silverlight 2, what about .NET? Easiest way to answer that is neither WPF nor Silverlight nor .NET are going away. I blogged about that, as mentioned earlier, the great blog post that Pete Brown's done on WPF present and future that talks about more WPF investments and feature set. So no, they're definitely not going away. Yeah, don't worry. Other things. Matthew asked, what's the roadmap for truly unifying WPF and Silverlight? We've talked over the last couple, really the last 2 years about this notion we kind of call convergence, which is when we started Silverlight, we started out with the WPF API, but built it so that it could run across multiple device form factors and also works across platform. But we kept kind of the core WPF programming model and API so that we have consistency between them. And with each release of Silverlight and with each release of WPF, we've kind of expanded the programming model APIs on both sides. So, for example, Silverlight 4 has a bunch of the WPF data binding features added, richer commanding and behavior support, and so on. Likewise, WPF 4 incorporated Visual Style Manager that Silverlight pioneered, as well as things like cache composition and animation easing and some of the other features that first showed up in Silverlight. So with each release, we're trying to converge the APIs to be kind of the same. At the same time, we're also looking at, from an implementation perspective, are there ways that we can actually converge the implementation so that we have just one code base? And so that's a gradual process. It already started with Silverlight 4 and WPF 4. They do share some code. In Pete Brown's sort of WPF future post, one of the things we talked about was how can you take Silverlight controls and Silverlight content and host it inside a WPF app. And you're going to see us with each release kind of get a little closer and closer to that vision. So, that is something we're definitely working on, and you'll see it show up more and more with kind of each release. And what we want to do is have the best of both worlds and, have it be a complete superset. And, that's sort of the plan that we're kind of executing on. So Brian asked the question, what technology have you been involved in that is your baby? Which framework, technology, gadget, toy at all are you most proud of having been part of? That's a good question. There's probably a lot. I think .NET in general I've been involved in since I started on the original .NET prototype kind of, I think, November, December of 97. So it's been a while there. So obviously ASP.NET was one of my first babies, so to speak, and kind of evolved through things like MVC and Razor and things like that. And on the client side, I wasn't part of WPF to begin with. That was a different team, but obviously think of WPF and Silverlight and things like that also as things involved in, and more recently things like Windows Phone 7 and the work we've done there, and CLR and a whole bunch of things. So I guess I think about having a lot of babies, which I'm very lucky about, and I get to participate and play in all of them, which is kind of cool. Let's see. I think we're almost over, so let me answer a few more questions, and then, which I won't be able to get to everything, but hopefully answer a number of them here. So, I'll ask the question, what value does Web Matrix add to Microsoft as a company? It's kind of a broad question, but for people that don't know, so Web Matrix is a new tool that we're coming out with for web development. It's kind of a fairly lightweight tool in the sense that Visual Studio is our tool for professional developers, period. Web Matrix is kind of a tool aimed at people that aren't necessarily professional developers, or for whom Visual Studio is bigger and more complex than they need. And it's kind of also designed a little bit in terms of kind of providing an end-to-end story so that it includes IIS Express, it includes SQL CD support, but it also includes things like the ability to download apps from the app gallery, whether they're ASP.NET apps or even PHP apps. And it also includes very rich publishing support for hosters. And so, I'd say it's the sweet spot that it occupies is really a couple different audiences. One are people just getting started and wanting to learn. And instead of having to learn lots of concepts, Web Matrix provides a kind of a streamlined workflow that really kind of provides a simpler way to get started. For people that just want to build a website, this might be you might be a pro developer, but you want to create a blog. Rather than write code and code the blog, Web Matrix makes it really easy to say, hey, new project, start with say Orchard or Subtext or WordPress or Drupal or .NET Nuke or Brocco or whatever different kind of app template that you want. Download it, tweak a few CSS, maybe add a little bit of code to it, and then hit publish, and both find a hoster and do one-click both site and database publishing to it. And so a lot of times, I think Web Matrix will appeal both to people that for whom Visual Studio might be daunting, as well as frankly to people that love and use Visual Studio for their day-to-day job, but want to basically maintain a site or a blog, and for whom Visual Studio either is overkill or is more, not aimed specifically at that scenario. And I think also Web Matrix goes after an audience, which is people that are building sites for others. Again, primarily more on the app side, as opposed to writing custom apps. Things like, hey, I want to tweak a CMS or I want to tweak a blog, and Web Matrix has a nice workflow for that. So we don't see Web Matrix replacing Visual Studio at all. Visual Studio is our professional development tool line, but we do see Web Matrix going after a broader audience for whom our existing tools aren't a perfect match. And there's a lot of people out there like that, and we want to basically have them use our technology more, and frankly sell more servers, and have the skills that they learn also seamlessly upgrade to Visual Studio. So they're learning VB, they're learning C#, they're learning .NET, and so at some point if they want to build a professional app, use Visual Studio, and you can easily do that, and they're not having to relearn new languages or new skills. They can transfer it seamlessly. So don't think Web Matrix is competing with Visual Studio. If you're happy with Visual Studio doing professional development, you shouldn't even look at Web Matrix. But if you are trying to build a blog or you're trying to build a CMS for your site or your family site, I think Web Matrix, even if you are a professional .NET developer, still has a bunch of interesting things in there for you. I'm going to do two more questions. Unfortunately, there's thousands of really good questions. Let me try to do something that I haven't really talked about yet. Tim asked a question, is Microsoft going to roll out something for the NoSQL space? I don't think we've announced anything specifically with NoSQL, although if you look at things like the Azure table storage APIs and capabilities that are there today, that does kind of provide a NoSQL-like API and capability. If you're interested in using kind of a NoSQL-based approach, or more, the other way people refer to that is sort of more of a document-centric storage approach, there are a couple really good NoSQL implementations for .NET. The NDA has a pretty cool, I think, Raven DB project. It's called Raven or Raven DB, I think it's Raven. That's worth checking out. I've heard good things about it. I haven't used it personally, but I've seen a bunch of good blog posts about it. I think that's going to get added to NewPack shortly, or maybe early next year. And so the cool thing is, with a lot of these libraries out there that are not necessarily built by Microsoft, but by either open source projects, with the community, is you can take any .NET project and you'll be able to say install package. I don't know exactly what it would be called, Raven or RavenDB or something else, you'll have a NoSQL or a document-centric database included in your project, hopefully within, 10 seconds. So that's one of the reasons why we're doing NuGet, is so that people don't have to just look at Microsoft as shipping every API. We really want to try to empower the community and build up a strong open-source ecosystem around .NET, and really help the people like Yende and others that are building great open-source projects. We want to try to encourage more people to use them and make them easier for people to get started with. Mark asked, do I still cut code? I don't. It's been a while since, well, maybe not that long, but since I don't typically check in production code anymore, mostly because they don't let me, but mostly because a lot of my job is kind of managing and kind of dropping in and providing feedback on lots of things as opposed to kind of focusing on a specific area. What I typically do a lot of is write prototypes, and so typically I will write prototypes or send very detailed feedback in terms of playing with something, in terms of suggestions. So unfortunately I don't write as much lines of code as production code as I'd like. But I do get a chance to actually give a lot of feedback on designs, and especially in the early stage, write a lot of prototype code. And so I tend to kind of write a prototype, send them to the team, and say, "Hey, this is cool. Shouldn't we do this?" And oftentimes they listen, which is nice. Let's see. Answer maybe one last question. Where do I get my red polo shirts from? The polo thing is kind of taken off in this sort of weird, wacky way. I basically wore a polo shirt for some event a couple years ago. The event went well, and so I thought the next year for the same event, hey, why don't I just wear another polo shirt? And I did that, and soon people kind of expected me to wear polo shirts, and I actually did a trip to Europe, I think 2 years ago or something, and I brought like 2 or 3 polo shirts, red polo shirts, and I was doing like 5 events in a week, so I kind of ran out of laundry, and I showed up for some event wearing a blue shirt, and I swear people booed me, or were going to boo me, and were very upset. So now I actually have to wear red polo shirts anytime I do any public appearance, because apparently people get upset if I don't. So it's, I do actually wear polo shirts a lot. I have a couple colors, but red now increasingly seems to be the color that I have to wear. I do actually like red polo shirts, but anyway, so that's a little bit of the history there. Where do I buy them from? I kind of buy them from everywhere. Nordstrom, which is kind of a department store near my house, tends to be a place where I buy a lot of them. But any red polo shirt will work. Brian asks, is it true that you can buy Scott Goose red polo shirts at the Microsoft store? I don't believe so. I think they do sell red shirts, but I'm not entirely sure it's because of me. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's not because of me, but I think that's a wild rumor that Scott Hanselman created. Don't believe everything Scott tells you. And don't tell him I said that. One last question, because I feel like there's so many good ones here, and I feel bad for not answering more. Sean Lively said, hey, with about every release of Visual Studio, there's been a new data access tool. Is there anything new on the horizon, or can I expect EF to be around for a while? Gosh, I hope we're not going to introduce a new data access API in the next release. Pretty confident for the next release of Visual Studio and .NET, there won't be any new data APIs. Instead, we're going to focus on continuing to enhance the work that's there in EF. We will probably add some async APIs to ADO.NET below it. But our plan is to try to have a little bit more longer-term lifetime for a lot of our data APIs, and not necessarily create new ones. I don't necessarily run the data team, so I can't conclusively say that. But I know what their current plans are for the next release, and I think that's definitely the direction they're going on. And that is feedback that many people, both internal and outside, have passed along. The other question that John asked is about the Silverlight 4 save file dialog is missing the default file name parameter. If you send me an email on that, I can double check. I believe the reason it's not there, unfortunately, is because of security. And we want to avoid the ability for someone to pop open a dialog and say, hey, overwrite an important file. But if you send me an email, I can hook you up with the team. We can find out exactly why it's not there. But I'm 99% sure it's because of security that's there. Kev asked, every developer has a favorite drink that keeps you coding late in the hours of the night. What's yours? It's probably coffee for me now. I used to be a big Diet Coke drinker until I read some article about how Diet Coke was bad for you, and I figured 14 Diet Cokes a day might be bad for me then. And so now I'm a coffee drinker, and fortunately now I'm up to 4 or 5 cups of coffee a day, so that's probably not good for me either. I also drink a lot of water. I'm famous for drinking a lot of water here at work. We have these blue Talking Marine beverages, which are like sparkling waters that we get for free in our fridge, and I actually have 2 of them right now on the table. Anyway, there we go. So one last one, and then go from there. Ian Walker says, use it at PDC, and they do have my shirts in the company store. That's pretty hilarious. I got to go to the company store and check that out. A good last one to end on. Lots of good detailed ones. Yeah, Josh asked the question, which is the fantastic profiling tooling support we added to Windows Phone 7 that I demoed in my, I was in Steve Ballmer's keynote, where I was showing Silverlight for Windows Phone. Is that going to be supported for the full version of Silverlight on the desktop side? Yes, that is actually a plan that we have, is to go ahead and add that capability for all versions of Silverlight. We focused to start off with on the phone side, mainly because the challenges, which is around for small form factors and small devices, really getting smooth perf. And I think for a lot of us that have come from the desktop or server world, it's hard for us to imagine, like, we need to build something that is graphically richer than what we're expecting on the desktop, but we need to do it on a processor that's 1/3 or 1/4 the speed of an Atom netbook processor. And that's kind of the problem you have when you target phones. And so the reason we did the profiler was to really kind of provide a tool that lets people kind of identify the hotspots, especially around rendering time and layout time, but you'll see us also extend that to include memory consumption as well as code computation performance, and make it really easy for people to kind of tweak and tune their apps at a very fine-grained level. So it is available, or we are working. I downloaded it on the phone today, but the same infrastructure will work for Silverlight desktop as well, and also probably for WPF desktop as well in the future. So with that, I think we're actually, unfortunately, about 15 minutes over. We're supposed to go. Oh, take it back. No, we're supposed to go to 11:30. Oh, never mind. I gotta keep asking questions. I'm sorry. I thought this ended at 11. So okay, sorry. So we'll have a couple more questions coming soon. 1 second here. Back to my live meeting. Excellent. So other questions. Chris asked a question. When will we see the bids for the portable library project? This is a project that we talked about for the first time at PDC 2 to 3 weeks ago. Basically, it's a new class project that you can add that allows you to build an assembly that is binary compatible across all versions of .NET. And what's nice about the portable library project is it'll actually filter IntelliSense and compilation so that you can only use the APIs that are available across all the libraries. So you can't inadvertently use an API that's only available on phone or only available on desktop. That'll be part of ES 2010 SB1, and so that'll show up in the SB1 timeframe. And I believe portable libraries will also work on Mono. And so, if people don't know, Chris does a lot of work on MonoTouch, and so I believe you can actually take that assembly and use it with MonoTouch safely as well. Josh asked the question, which is, hey, why do we introduce the concept of dependency properties instead of just making reflection faster, better? He says, hey, it feels like a hack. For people who don't know, dependency properties are a concept that is in WPF and Silverlight. At first glance, it probably does look kind of goofy or like a hack. Basically, one of the things about dependency properties is it's sort of a challenge with anything where you create lots and lots of objects is specifically around vtable size. So if you think about an object or instance of an object that you create, if it has a bunch of properties on it, and those properties are backed by a field on a class, then you run into a situation where every time you create an instance of that thing, you might have 20 or 100 or so fields in that class. So in other words, if you have a button and the button has 100 properties, and those properties include things like ints and doubles and points and floats and things like that, you basically end up creating a bunch of vtable storage, and the stack size or the size of the object when you allocate it can be quite big. And especially with UI frameworks and ones like WPF and Silverlight, where you create lots of those types of objects and have a deep hierarchy, you can end up actually using a lot of memory and really increase the size of your objects significantly. And so we create this concept called a property system inside WPF and Silverlight, so that we can inherit properties from parent properties, and we don't have to actually have a dedicated field reference for every property on a control or a visual element object. And it basically allows for kind of much more efficient storage and much more efficient memory allocation than would otherwise be. It also then allows us to do things like data binding and styling and theming in a much richer way. And again, so that we're not having to poke lots and lots of objects, we can kind of float it through the property system in kind of a more efficient way and get better performance. So that's kind of why we did it and why it exists. And we think it exists for a good reason. Hey, SQL Compact 4, is it entirely managed code? Or is it native? How does it work? SQL Compact 4 itself is actually, I think, almost entirely native code. But it is designed so that you can copy it into the bin directory, say, of an ASP.NET app, or copy it with a client app, and basically treat it like a reference assembly, or like an assembly that you embed within your app. And we did the work with from a security model perspective with .NET 4, so that the database, the embedded database, can basically run without a medium trust. So, for example, if you add SQL CE to an ASP.NET app, whether it's a web forms app, an MVC app, or a pure ASP.NET Web Pages app, you can basically have the embedded database be part of the app. You can FTP it up to a hoster, and it will just work. There's no additional installation that needs to happen on the hoster side. There's no security permissions that need to be granted. It does work in medium trust and doesn't require an install there. And so it's, that ends up being kind of a nice deployment option. It makes it a lot easier. Raj asked the question, are there any new developments you wish to share regarding HTML5, Visual Studio, or MVC 3 or 4? Well, we actually have done some HTML5 integration with HTML and MVC 3. One of the things with HTML5 is such a broad term. So one challenge always when you talk about HTML5 is it's kind of a broad umbrella term for lots of things. And so exactly what is HTML5 versus what's CSS versus what's HTML5 but not implemented across all browsers, what's part of the standard, it's a little confusing. And then also there's obviously bits of HTML5 that require new browsers, and then there's parts that are semantics that you can also start taking advantage of today that have either graceful degrade or can still work on older browsers. And one of the things we've done with ASP.NET MVC 3 is taking advantage of one of those latter capabilities to enable something we call unobtrusive JavaScript support. We do that both for our AJAX helpers in MVC3 as well as for our validation infrastructure in MVC3 for doing client-side validation. And basically the way it works is HTML5 has a kind of a semantic that they're encouraging, which is rather than add attributes to tag elements or within a document, they support a notion of being able to add what's called data dash attributes to elements. And so if, instead of saying, text box required equals true, or for input type equals text required equals true, you can actually say input type equals text, and I could say data dash .goo validation equals required. HTML, it's basically guaranteed that HTML5 won't add new attributes that are data dash and conflict with it, and HTML validators will treat anything with a data dash as legal HTML5, so that you won't get validation errors when you try to verify that your site is HTML compliant. What's nice about the data dash stuff is older browsers ignore them, and so you can actually use the data dash approach with IE6 even and other older browsers without problems. And so what we do with MVC3 is if you use, for example, like ajax.actionLink, which is one of our built-in server-side helpers, or if you decorate any of your model objects with, say, required attribute with data annotation stuff that we added in MVC2, instead of outputting inline JavaScript like we did before, we actually now output HTML elements that have data dash attributes on them. So we do like data dash validation, equals required, I think, is the thing we do if your model object has required output. And then we basically have JavaScript files that you can add to your page, which live in separate libraries, that on load will actually look through your DOM elements for anything that has the data dash, validation things on it, and basically enable those client-side validations for you. Benefit with that is it reduces the HTML size of your markup because you're not injecting inline JavaScript. It also means that if for some reason the JavaScript file can't be downloaded or accessed, your page will still work. Instead of client-side validation, it'll do server-side validation, but it'll still work. And if someone has JavaScript turned off on their site or in the browser, it'll still work as well. And it's just a little cleaner. And so that's one example of us taking advantage of HTML5 today, but we're doing it in kind of a smart way so that it'll work with older browsers as well. And you also see with MVC3 and with Matrix, all of our default project templates use HTML5 doc types by default now, and so on. So so anyway, we are starting to take advantage of that, and you'll see richer support in the future as well. Ryan asked a question, do you see any improvements from ASP.NET MVC in terms of readability and cleanliness in the view engine coming back to ASP.NET Web Forms? You will definitely see lots of improvements coming to Web Forms in the next release. We're looking to try to take some of the same unobtrusive JavaScript support that I just was talking about in the context of MVC to Web Forms as well for validation. So you'll probably see us use unobtrusive JavaScript for all the ASP.NET validators by default going forward in Web Forms. You're also going to see us do richer model-based validation, I think, in the next release of Web Forms as well. Again, so that you can build your models once and both do clean validation, model-level validation, both server-side and client-side, both with Web Forms and MVC in the future. And likewise, some of the same view engine helpers and things you'll also see us take into Web Forms as well for the next release as well. So it's super important people think, hey, I hear all this buzz about MVC. Is that the only thing you care about? No, definitely not. The reason you're hearing a lot about it is we are about to ship a new release of it. And it is something new. So we do think there's an audience of people that like MVC and like that type of approach. There's also a huge audience, in fact, the majority of ASP.NET developers use Web Forms, and we think there's obviously a lot of validity and a lot of goodness in Web Forms as well, which is why we built it and pushed it so hard in the past. You're going to see us invest across both going forward. So there is a lot of new features coming to MVC, which a lot of people say, hey, it seems like there's a lot of new stuff. Probably because we started with 0 in MVC. So anytime you start with a brand new project, it does feel like the velocity on it's fast because every new feature effectively doubles the surface area in terms of features. But you're also going to see us, invest heavily in Web Forms as well. Web Forms has a much bigger existing feature set, but you'll continue to see us adding new features and enhancements with each major release going forward. PBZ asked, any rough estimate for when the next Web Forms will come out? You'll see the next release of Web Forms proper come out with the next release of Visual Studio and .NET. But you'll see us use NuGet to distribute new Web Forms controls and features as well in a fairly agile way before that in addition. So, for example, there's a cool library that's out there today that we put out recently, which is the, what's it called? Basically allows you to do image slicing, CSS sprites. And I'm going to hopefully do a blog post about that sometime before the holidays or over the holidays. But that's a cool example of a library that we'll make available in NuGet, and that works great in both Web Forms. And it also, you can also use it in MVC, but there's a bunch of Web Forms specific controls that come with it as well. Tom asked the question, are there any features expected in MVC4 which will outdate starting major projects right now based on MVC3 or Razor? So I think what you mean is basically replace existing features. No, we don't know of any. We don't know of anything in the. We haven't finalized exactly what's in MVC4 yet, but in general, I'd say one of the things we've done with MVC so far, and hopefully we've done also with web forms pretty well, is kind of try to provide a roadmap where we kind of don't just obsolete things every other release. And so, MVC1 introduced a bunch of functionality, MVC2 built on it, MVC3 built on that. There really isn't any features I can think of, even in MVC3, that replace MVC2. Instead, what we're really trying to do is, we're adding the features and complementing it, but we don't have any. We don't know of any features right now that will be obsoleted with the next release. Jeremy asked a question, any plans to release source control management system for small teams, say 1 to 3 members? I mentioned a little bit earlier, and we downloaded it for the first time at the PDC about 3 weeks ago, but the ability to use TFS in the cloud. And so, and one of the specific scenarios for TFS in the cloud with Azure is specifically for small teams that don't want to have to manage a box and do backup and things like that. Instead, you'll be able to go to Azure, sign up, and in a few minutes basically have a TFS-based system in the cloud that you can use. That way you don't have to install anything on-premise, you don't have to handle backups, and the pricing of that will certainly be designed so that for small teams it's very cost-effective in order to do. Naveen asked a question, is there any way to do test projects to make them work in DS Express? Or do you have to launch NUnit and other GUIs? Unfortunately, with DS 2010 Express today, the unit test library runner support is not available in Express. It's only available at DS Pro and higher. You can, however, use NUnit in DS Express. And so if you use NuGet, you can actually, I think, say, install package NUnit, and that'll actually install NUnit for a class library, and it'll also install the NUnit test runner. And so if you then say, I think, NUnit or NUnit GUI, it'll pop open the GUI, and then you still have a separate window for running tests, but that will at least work with the Express editions of DS. Each release we do look at, do we bring more features to Express? And so, that is something we'll certainly evaluate for the future, but for right now, unfortunately, it's not available. Gary asked the question, what's the expected migration path from MVC3 RC to MVC3 RTM, especially on web servers? We'll publish release notes for any breaking changes we make between MVC3 RC and the RTM. There's a few small naming changes that we're making based on kind of last-minute feedback from people. So, for example, we had an attribute called skip request validation that you could add, and I actually blogged about it in the RC, that you can add to bypass model HTML validation on input, which is a great feature. Someone in a blog comment said, gosh, that's a really cool feature. That's a really ugly name. Can you just call it like allow HTML? That was a really good suggestion, and so you're going to see in the final release we actually renamed it to be allow HTML. And people have had a couple of other suggestions along those lines of sort of simple naming changes. Good news is you can use refactoring tools to update that, so we'll publish all those naming changes. I don't think there's any semantic changes that we're introducing. It's just sort of a property rename here and there. And so the update, once MVC3 RTM comes out, it's basically just open up your project, read our release notes, and hopefully within about 5 or 10 minutes you can make all those changes. And then you can just repush your app to the server, and it should work. So the update should be relatively straightforward. And we're not cutting any features from the RC to the RTM, so all the features that are in the RC are safe to use. The only changes really are a couple of naming changes that are kind of more along the lines of property and class name tweaks as opposed to anything significant. So we are out of time, unfortunately. Let me see if there is, I'll answer one more question. Someone asked me at the very beginning, any plans to come to Chicago? And then someone asked me just now, any plans to do more talks in Europe, like I've done earlier in the year? or are they going to be online based? I don't have any travel planned right now. People know I just had a new son about 7 weeks ago, and so and I have another son already, so it's a little hectic at the moment in the Guthrie household, and so I don't have any plans in the next couple of weeks to do any speaking tours. I will be going on trips next year, probably when Grandma's visiting me, so that my wife doesn't kill me. And so I probably will do a speaking tour in Europe at some point next year. And I don't know when I'll be in Chicago next, but it's been a while, so maybe I can go to Chicago, and I will be doing some events on the East Coast, I think, and the West Coast next year as well. So I'll use my blog to actually blog details about my travel schedule once I know it more. But I am hoping to do lots of online events like the one we have here today pretty regularly, and I'll obviously use my blog and online videos to do training and talk about new things as well. The other thing I'll mention, and I'll be doing a blog post about it possibly as early as tonight, is a bunch of web camps that are coming up around the world in the weeks and months ahead. I think we have more than 20 events scheduled for the first half of next year around lots of cities, lots of countries all around the world. There's actually some events going on right now in India, I believe in Hyderabad and Bangalore and I think Chennai maybe as well. And literally, I think in the next week or two, or even this week, and then starting January, there's a whole bunch of events going on all over the world. And so I'll post a pointer to those and details on how you can sign up. They're free web camps. They're all-day events. Sometimes they're even 2 days. And there's a bunch in particular. They're called web camps because they are focused more on web. So if you're interested in some of the latest things coming out with ASP.NET and server-based development, there's lots of good there. And then for those of you doing Silverlight, there's a Silverlight Firestarter event that's happening 2 weeks from yesterday that I've also blogged about, so you can find details on how to register on my blog. That's an all-day event that's live on the web. You can also attend in person, focused on Silverlight development. And so you'll see lots going on there. And then obviously for WPF and EF and things like that, we're also doing events as well as have a bunch of training material that will be coming online in the near future with more information there. If you haven't checked it out, the new Prism release just happened, I think, in the last week for WPF, and there's also Silverlight content as part of that as well. So definitely check out the Prism guidance for WPF. There's a lot of great material there. They really did a good job with that. And I believe we're going to be posting some EF4 content on the ASP.NET website in the form of tutorial shortly as well that you can check out. So, and if you haven't already been bombarded with Windows Phone 7 training content, that's available as well. So lots and lots of content. And in general, I think one of the things we're trying to do, and especially early next year, I think you'll see more of it, is update our website. So instead of it being kind of just hodgepodges of lots of different topics and tutorials, provide a little bit more prescription and a little bit more kind of guidance and 1, 2, 3 kind of steps for learning new technologies and for using technologies. And so we're in the process of kind of updating them right now, but you'll probably see come January, February, March, a lot more updates to our website that provide a little bit more guidance, a little bit more prescription, and hopefully make it easier to learn all the technologies that are coming out and to find all the great training material that's there. So with that, I think we're actually 10 minutes over. I want to thank everyone for coming. I apologize for all the questions I wasn't able to get to. There's a lot of good ones. Come back again. We'll do another one of these things in probably about 2 months. And ask me there, and then also pay attention to my blog at weblogs.asp.net/gotgoo, as well as on Twitter. Post questions there, and I'll try to keep blogging and answer more of them in the months ahead. So thanks again, and for those of you who joined late, we will post a audio version of this talk available, and I'll link to it from my Lidnug blog post that I've already done on my blog. I'll update the blog post with a pointer to the audio download of this talk as soon as it's available. So thanks again.
Yep, thank you, Scott, and thanks everyone for showing up and asking questions and being Lidnug members. We'll definitely let you know as soon as the recording is available. Should be very soon. We'll let Scott know as well. And I want to say happy holidays to everyone, and we'll see you in future events. Have a good day. Bye-bye.